Welcome to the Relevance Report, where we explore the relevant stories that are shaping our world today. I'm Amanda Erickson, your host this week. On today's show, as we inch closer to summer, Edmonton's Fringe Festival calls for action amid funding struggles. Then, we'll chat with Morgan Evans of the Edmonton Queer History Project. Next, we'll hear how Bell Media layoffs could be the direct result of online media distribution. And finally, we'll get a retrospective on the viability of Edmonton's spoken word scene. At the start of this year, the Edmonton Poetry Festival's board of directors did not renew the contract of their artistic producer, Shima Robinson. Instead, the board executives decided to restructure and replace the position altogether, and are now hiring for an executive director. Creatives and community members alike were left in a state of uncertainty over the scene. But how warranted is this anxiety? Is this a huge loss for the community, or just another change? Zach Defoe reports.
A familiar scene for artists and poets. A warm and noisy corner in a crowded campus pub, where burgeoning artists collect, gather their courage, and move to the stage to hone their craft. They're sharing a small piece of themselves with an audience. However brave these artists might feel, poetry is a classically undervalued art form. Earlier this year, the Edmonton Poetry Festival decided to not renew the contract of Shima Robinson as the festival's artistic producer. Shima is an acclaimed Yeg local and Edmonton's 10th poet laureate. She's considered by many to be a potent, important voice in the scene. The move to replace her with an executive director position has left poets confused and disillusioned, feeling undervalued, unimportant. I spoke with some of them here tonight.
It's disheartening. There's a lot of people they're letting down. You want creatives to be valued. Sometimes people prove that they aren't. It's hard to come back from that, I think. I think if it's a poetry thing, then someone who actually is involved in poetry should be a part of it. And financially, I don't think you can really make a life doing that unless you become successful. So it has to sort of be like your side hustle for a lot of people, which is sad. When I just think of any writers being dropped from any scene or any like big name festivals, I just immediately think of censorship. So I'm speculating if that's the case, I'm not sure.
Spaces like these, and this feeling, this struggle and disillusionment, are familiar to Nisha Patel. Nisha was an absolute pillar of the scene during what she describes as the glory years, and was the city's 8th poet laureate.
It used to be like this habit. People would go out to poetry shows and there would be multiple open mics. And sometimes there was 2 open mics in a week and you could go to both and have completely different audiences. And it culminated kind of right before 2019 and 2020. Our first venue at the Breath and Poetry Collective shut down. Our second venue flooded. Then we went on hiatus. And then we went into a third venue, which then changed owners. And right when we were kind of getting into a regular swing of things again, we had regular people coming out to this event, this poetry open mic, which was kind of the crux of performance poetry. We went into a pandemic. Kind of never came back.
Both Shima and the festival board have kept a tight seal on the circumstances surrounding the decision to change the position and not renew the contract. They've also kept quiet about the possible implications it could have on the local festival circuit. While the Edmonton Poetry Festival is important, being a full-time writer, especially a poet, isn't really possible. It hasn't been for a long time. The average poetry author in Canada sells about 400 books in their debut, said Nisha. If we do the math, 400 books at a 10% royalty is $40. And that's gross value. In some cases, the net, what goes into the artist's pocket after everything shakes out, can be as low or lower than $2.
And that is like a good debut.
The bare truth of it is that not everyone is going to find success. But maybe that's not what it's about.
Most of us, we are writing when we have time. We are writing while putting the laundry in. We are writing and taking every performance opportunity that we can get. And I myself am very lucky to have a bunch of my income come from commissioned work. People who want to hear specific poems, but even that is an avenue that most people don't have. I always try to encourage folks that, that are starting out in creative fields to build a life where they feel safe enough to be able to access art. And if that means you have a day job doing something else and you do art as a hobby, that still makes you an artist. The peace of mind that comes from having some sort of stability is so important.
Thinking back to the pub, all these people gathered here, sharing themselves with an audience, trying to grow, trying to make it in some small way. What can that journey look like? What's the point if even our laureates, the strongest voices we have, are struggling to fit into their own scene, their own community? Who defines what success is? The truth is, there really isn't one scene. There isn't just one space for this. Pockets of community and projects are in a constant tide. Little embers burning in places like here, in times like now. And maybe that's enough. Maybe we are enough. We can make our own damn festival. See you later, poet. From Towers Pub, in Edmonton, Zach Defoe.
Bell Media cut 9% of its workforce. That's 4,800 jobs. This is Bell's largest restructuring initiative in almost 30 years. The emergence of alternative news platforms like Yegwave changes the way in which Edmontonians are getting their news. We explore the forces driving the transformation of the media landscape, from the decline of traditional outlets to the rise of digital disruptors. We delve into the heart of this evolving narrative, seeking to understand its impact on how we consume news and engage with our communities.
Bell Media, a major player in Canada's media scene, recently made some major waves in the industry by revealing extensive job cuts and the sale of numerous regional radio stations. This move saw Bell Media reducing its workforce by 9%. This resulted in a staggering loss of 4,800 jobs. This restructuring stands as the largest initiative Bell Media has taken in nearly 3 decades, marking a pivotal moment in Canadian media history. While this round of layoffs is the most significant, it's not the first time Bell has downsized its staff. In the span of just 9 months, the company has parted ways with over 6,000 employees, indicating a prolonged period of restructuring. In addition to the job cuts, Bell Media also disclosed reductions in weekend newscasts, evening programs, and daytime programming. To better understand this situation, we hear from longtime journalist and executive producer for the CBC, Neil Fitzpatrick.
There are fewer resources to tell stories, and therefore fewer stories will be told. This is a pattern that's been developing for several years. As I said, if you look around at any local news coverage scenario, take Edmonton for an example, there are fewer and fewer reporters covering news conferences from the government, from organizations, the police, etc. There are fewer journalists telling those stories effectively and thoroughly. And that's one of the big issues.
But what led to these drastic measures? The answer lies in the changing habits of consumers and the challenges facing traditional media outlets in the digital age. With more Canadians turning to online sources of news, television, and radio networks, they're seeing a decline in advertising revenue, forcing them to reevaluate their business models. According to a CBC News tally, Bell Media's cuts have amounted to the loss of 48.5 hours of original local TV news programming each week across the country. This reduction comes at a time where audiences, particularly younger demographics, are shifting away from traditional television broadcasts in favor of online platforms. To better understand this trend, let's take a closer look at the numbers. A report by the Reuters Institute revealed that 69% of Canadians now get their news online, with social media playing a significant role in news consumption. This shift is particularly pronounced among younger audiences, who are increasingly turning to platforms like Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter for their daily dose of information. Enter Yeg Wave, a digital platform disrupting the scene with its rapid news delivery and engaging content. Launched amidst the pandemic, Yeg Wave quickly gained traction, boasting more Instagram followers than Edmonton's major news outlets combined. But what sets Yeg Wave apart? The Griff reporter and journalist Liam Newsbingen has looked in depth at these emerging digital media platforms such as Yeg Wave. Liam tells us the bigger picture when it comes to anonymous news and what that means for the industry as a whole.
I think that's something that legacy media struggles with. Like Yegwave, you see very successfully someone capturing the young demographic, using everything you need to capture that young demographic. The voice, the brand, the ability to get their attention, and being on a platform where they're going to be accessible at that.
Yeg Wave's influence extends far beyond its impressive Instagram following. It's fundamentally changing the game for local news coverage. By harnessing the power of user-generated content, Yeg Wave has created a space where everyday citizens become citizen journalists, sharing their perspectives and experience in real time. Whether it's capturing moments of local activism, highlighting community initiatives, or shedding light on underreported issues in the Edmonton area, Yeg Wave is turning heads when it comes to news.
I would almost compare it more to like Instagram tabloidism. It's very much following the whim of the algorithm, and the algorithm follows the whim of intense emotion. People who get riled up about things comment a lot, lots of interaction, lots of likes. So they're going off of stuff that's going to generate that kind of outcome, and not necessarily following the same best ethical practices that journalists follow.
As we reflect on the ramifications of Bell Media's layoff, it's essential to consider the human impact behind the headlines. For those who have lost their jobs, this is a time of uncertainty and transition. However, it serves as a reminder for the need of adaptation in the ever-evolving media landscape. It also presents an opportunity for innovation and growth with local journalists in certain areas. By embracing digital technology and the transformation to the online presence of news outlets, organizations can not only safeguard jobs, but also create new opportunities for employment in the digital realm. This means retraining and reskilling staff to meet the demand of a digital-first audience and leveraging technology to enhance storytelling and audience engagement. Unfortunately, the future of traditional media hinges on its ability to adapt, evolve, and thrive in the digital age. By embracing change and embracing the digital landscape, media organizations can ensure that no one is left behind and that the legacy of journalism continues to endure in the digital era. This was Stefano Ferra from Edmonton, Alberta, MacEwan University.
The Edmonton Queer History Project began as a community university project aiming to celebrate the 35th year of Edmonton Pride. Since 2022, the EQHP has blossomed into a multimedia website, a downtown history map, guided walking tours, and a podcast. Morgan Evans of the Edmonton Queer History Project sits down with me, Amanda Erickson, to chat about the history and the future of the EQHP. Amanda Erickson reports. I sat down with Morgan Evans from the Edmonton Queer History Project on a gloomy Thursday afternoon to discuss the EQHP. Let me give you a quick rundown. The Edmonton Queer History Project began as a community university partnership designed to help recognize and celebrate the 35th anniversary of Edmonton's Pride celebrations. Then, its materials were utilized in the traveling exhibition Reimagining Normal by Dr. Michelle Lavoie and Shane Golby. In March 2022, the EQHP debuted its newest initiative, which includes an interactive multimedia website, a downtown history map, guided walking tours, and a podcast.
We are trying to focus on presenting the places, people, and events of importance to Edmonton's queer community, and also like the greater Edmonton area and how that's had impacts beyond the city limits. That's really the overarching aspect of it, and that's within the understanding that traditional historical institutions who often view themselves as arbiters of truth, this has been history that's been deprioritized and at times ignored and rejected. As an organization, we often prioritize things like oral history, which your traditional museum typically doesn't. They want objects in context. We want stories.
There is a lot of pride in this organization, pun intended. Evans touches on some of her most prideful moments with the Edmonton Queer History Project.
A lot of the stuff that I've been working on personally is very much all like long-term projects in progress. But some of the things that we do that are really good, we run a series of walking tours in the summer, which visit a few different locations. And my favorite aspect of those, honestly, is that we do find and hire community members who have lived experiences in those places or with the events we discuss, and they act as tour guides. And so with some of them, one of them is former Edmonton City Councillor Michael Fair, who's been, a lot of the current rights movement is kind of built on foundations that he helped to set, and every tour he gives is a little different. We have an interactive map of the city that people can contribute to, and that is, I think, is really nice as a tool to kind of like solicit those very personal stories. We do encourage people to contribute to that if possible. It's at eqhpstories.ca. We've gotten some very interesting bits of information about some pretty interesting locations or locations we didn't even know about, and as well as some pretty like heartwarming and even very humorous stories. And as for my own personal work, one of the things that I'm most proud of is not finished yet. It's not published yet, but doing a timeline of trans healthcare in Alberta, which I think is going to surprise a lot of people when that comes out, about some of the advances that were made here. Like, we were the first province in Canada, for example, to allow people to change their sex designation on legal documents. And I do choose that wording very carefully because at that point, there was still the provision of having full surgery, like bottom surgery. That was a requirement in those days. That didn't get removed until 2014. But yeah, that document is something I'm quite proud of. I would love to see a more permanent location, something akin to like not a traditional museum, but some sort of historical institution would be really good. It's just difficult because we're working within the framework of it being a research project at a university, which makes things like getting full-time staffing difficult.
Amidst the recent provincial policy introduction, the queer community has been thrust back into the cynical spotlight of public discussion. Hope is a difficult thing to conjure for many queer folks right now. However, it's important to keep in mind that strides are still being made in the right direction. With this, Morgan talks about her hopes for the future of the Edmonton Queer History Project.
It would be nice to see something that is able to have a more permanent physical presence. One of the things that we're working on is we are partnering with Fort Edmonton Park to do an exhibition this summer. They're giving us space in the Reed's Bazaar building, which they are now using for different community exhibitions. A number of people in the project have been putting together an exhibition on the legislation of morality in Canada, specifically as it affects queer folk. And so that's really cool, and I think that is kind of a step in that direction. It's just, how do we then transition from being this university research project where everybody's on, research assistant contracts, to it being a different kind of institution where we're on different kinds of yearly contracts, because that's the reality of the museums industry.
Thanks for joining us for The Relevance Report. This week's episode was produced by Stefano Ferra, Zach Defoe, Evan Watt, and myself, Amanda Erickson. The show was edited by Stefano Ferra. The show's supervising producer is Sheena Rossiter. Additional studio supervision by Sasha Stanoivich. This podcast is produced as part of the BCSC 325 Radio News and Documentaries course in the winter 2024 semester. The course is part of the Bachelor of Communication Studies program in the Department of Communication at MacEwan University. The show was edited and produced out of the McEwen Media Production Studio. This podcast was recorded on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta, Regions 2, 3, and 4 within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. Our theme music is called Buzzing by Kaylee Lambert, Stings by Break Studio, and logo design for this podcast is by Sasha Stanovich. Additional music by Laurel Violet and Warm Keys, licensed via Artlist, and Serge Quadrado, licensed via Pixabay. Once again, I'm Amanda Erickson, your host for this week's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to The Relevance Report on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you heard, please leave us a review and rating. It really helps people find the show. Please join us again next week when we report the relevant stories that are shaping our world.